Some people believe fate is written in stone, that no matter what you do, your destiny is set. But what if I told you that's a lie? That sometimes all it takes is one moment, one choice to rewrite everything. Welcome to Destiny Rewritten, where stories of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate triumph unfold. Tonight's tale is one of power struggles, humiliation, and the ultimate payback. It's a story of a woman who stepped into a world of wealth and deception, only to be cast aside, until she decided to take everything back. This isn't just another story. This is a lesson in power, a lesson in knowing your worth, and a lesson in how to turn the tables on those who try to break you. Stay with me until the very end, because trust me, every second of this story matters. By the time we're done, you'll see that sometimes revenge isn't just satisfying, it's necessary. If you love stories about twists, karma, and power shifts, make sure to subscribe to Destiny Rewritten and leave a comment below, because I want to hear your thoughts. And now, let's begin. A tense relationship with the mother-in-law I should have known from the moment I stepped into the Sinclair family estate that I was entering enemy territory. The massive wrought iron gates, the marble-floored entrance, the grand chandelier hanging like a crystallized judgment from above, it all screamed wealth, tradition, and exclusivity. And yet, none of it made me feel as small as the icy stare of Morgan Sinclair, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, as she sized me up with the subtle sneer only the truly powerful have mastered. I still remember our first meeting. It was at a family gathering, an event I later learned was an unspoken test to see if I was worthy of their bloodline. Adam, my fiancé at the time, had assured me it would be fine. "Just be yourself," he had said, pressing a reassuring kiss to my temple. "My mom takes some time to warm up to people, but she'll come around." What a fool I had been to believe that. As soon as I walked in, Morgan made it abundantly clear that she was not interested in warming up to me. She took one sweeping glance at my outfit, a tasteful, modest black dress, elegant but not extravagant, and pursed her lips. "Claire, dear," she said, her tone dripping with false warmth, "I almost mistook you for one of the servers." The room went silent. A few of Adam's relatives exchanged glances, some clearly uncomfortable, others amused. My fingers curled into my palm, but I forced a smile. "That's funny," I said lightly. "I was just about to say the same about you." A few muffled gasps, a quiet chuckle from one of Adam's cousins. Morgan's expression tightened for half a second before she let out a practiced laugh, the kind people in high society use when they're deciding whether or not to destroy you. "Oh, she's witty," she said to Adam, patting his arm as if I weren't standing there. "You always did have a thing for strays." And that was how the war began. The subtle attacks begin. Morgan never outright attacked me. No, she was too refined for that. Instead, she wielded passive-aggressive cruelty like a sharpened dagger, slicing at me in ways that left no visible wounds but bled me dry all the same. It started with the invitations I never received. Adam's family hosted lavish gatherings, garden parties, charity galas, weekend retreats at their country estate. I would only find out about them after the fact, when Adam would return from work talking about how much fun everyone had at the event. "You should have told me," I'd say, feeling the familiar sting of exclusion. His brows would furrow. "You weren't invited?" I'd shake my head. He'd sigh, rubbing his temples. "She probably just forgot. You know how my mom is, always managing a million things." Sure, forgot. Every single time. Then there were the gifts, or rather, the carefully curated insults disguised as gifts. For Christmas, Morgan handed Adam an Omega watch, a sleek, limited edition piece worth more than my car at the time. Then she turned to me, a saccharine smile on her face, and handed me a Yasing cookbook titled Simple Recipes for the Cookbook, titled Simple Recipes for the Clueless Wife. "Since you're new to our lifestyle," she said sweetly, "I thought this might help." Adam chuckled awkwardly, clearly sensing the tension but unwilling to address it. "That's, thoughtful, Mom." Thoughtful? Thoughtful? But that was always the way of it. Morgan would push the boundaries, test how much I would endure, and every time Adam would smooth things over, telling me not to take it personally. "She's just old-fashioned," he'd say. "She doesn't mean anything by it." But she did. And the worst part? I started to doubt myself. Was I really overreacting? Was she just a controlling mother looking out for her son? Was I being too sensitive? Gaslighting in its finest form. The final breaking point. A public betrayal. The moment that solidified everything, that made me realize I would never be accepted, came 6 months into my marriage. It was a charity event, one of the most exclusive gatherings of the year, and Adam assured me I was on the guest list. "Of course you're coming," he had said. "You're my wife." I spent weeks preparing the perfect dress, the perfect hair, the perfect etiquette. I was determined to prove that I belonged. But when I arrived at the grand ballroom, dressed in a flowing, elegant gown, the security stopped me at the entrance. "Your name isn't on the list," the man said, flipping through a tablet. I blinked. "That's not possible. My husband is Adam Sinclair. He's already inside." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't let anyone in who's not on the guest list." People were staring now. Whispers floated around me like invisible daggers. I felt heat rise to my face. "Can you check again?" "Already did," the security guard said. "You're not listed." A slow dread curled in my stomach. Then, as if summoned by the sheer force of my humiliation, Morgan Sinclair appeared at the entrance, a flute of champagne in her manicured hand. She sighed dramatically. "Oh, Claire, you actually came." I swallowed hard. "Why wouldn't I?" She took a delicate sip from her glass, feigning surprise. "Darling, this is a high-profile event. For family. You know how these things work." I felt my chest tighten. "I am family." Morgan smiled, the kind of smile a predator gives its prey before the killing blow. "Are you?" The words landed like a gunshot. I glanced over her shoulder, searching for Adam, the man who was supposed to stand by my side, protect me, love me. He was already inside, laughing with business executives, entirely unaware of what was happening at the door. Or worse, he knew, and he didn't care. Morgan leaned in, dropping the pretense of kindness entirely. Her voice was a razor against my pride. And then, she walked inside, leaving me outside in the cold, alone, humiliated. But that night, something shifted inside me. I had spent months trying to earn my place, trying to be good enough, trying to convince Adam that his mother's cruelty was something that could be reasoned with. I was done. Morgan thought she had won, that she had broken me. She had no idea what was coming. Because revenge is best served cold. The dinner incident, a public humiliation attempt. I arrived at Le Mirage that evening, dressed in a sleek, elegant black dress, my hair styled just right, and a quiet confidence in my steps. I wasn't nervous. I had been part of this family long enough to know how to handle them. Or so I thought. The maitre d' barely spared me a glance before shaking his head. "I'm sorry, madam, but there is no reservation under your name." I blinked, momentarily thrown off. "That's impossible. My husband mentioned dinner with his family. They should already be here." His polite but firm smile didn't waver. "I just checked. There is a reservation for 6 under Morgan Sinclair, but I'm afraid—" A sharp, familiar voice cut through our conversation. "Oh, Claire." I knew that voice. Morgan Sinclair. Her tone dripped with amusement, her words slow and deliberate, stretching out my name like she was savoring the taste of it. I turned, and there she was, seated at a grand candle-lit table, perfectly poised in her designer ensemble, a glass of wine in her manicured hand, the epitome of wealth and elegance. Next to her, Adam sat stiffly, his expression unreadable, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. Beside him, his sisters Charlotte and Emma whispered to each other, their smirks just barely concealed behind their wine glasses. The weight of their judgment filled the air. Other guests began to notice, their glances flickering between Morgan and me, sensing the drama unfolding. I felt my stomach twist, but I refused to let it show. "I don't understand," I said, my voice calm. Morgan's smile widened, her eyes gleaming with cruel delight. "Oh, sweetheart, did you actually think I'd include you in tonight's dinner?" She let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head. "This is a family gathering. A place like this is... well, it's a bit out of your league, don't you think?" Maybe a budget restaurant suits you better. Charlotte snickered behind her wineglass. Emma avoided my gaze. And Adam? Adam just sat there, silent, not defending me, not standing up to his mother. He did nothing. The sting of betrayal should have burned, but instead, something inside me clicked. I smiled, slowly, deliberately. And then, in a voice as smooth as silk, I turned to the maitre d'. "Would you be so kind as to ask the owner to come out?" Morgan let out a mocking laugh, shaking her head. "Oh, please. Do you actually think the owner of this place is going to come out just because you asked?" I met her gaze evenly. Yes, because he knows me very well. For the first time that evening, Morgan's expression flickered with something other than amusement. Uncertainty. And then it happened. A deep, commanding voice cut through the room. "Claire?" The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath as Daniel Lyon, the owner of Le Mirage, stepped forward. Tall, refined, with silver at his temples and a presence that demanded respect, Daniel was a man who owned the room the moment he entered it. Morgan's confident smirk wavered. I turned to him, my smile widening. "Daniel, it's been a while." His gaze swept over the scene, from me to Morgan's table, then back to me. "It has," he agreed. "What brings you here tonight?" I gestured toward the table where my in-laws sat. Apparently, I wasn't included in the reservation. A bit of an oversight, wouldn't you say? Daniel's expression darkened. "That won't do at all." Morgan scoffed, crossing her arms. "Oh, please. You can't just find a table for her. This is a private dining establishment." Daniel's lips curled into a slow, knowing smile as he turned to the maitre d'. "Claire is not a walk-in," he said smoothly. "She is family." A stunned silence settled over the table. Charlotte's wineglass nearly slipped from her fingers. Emma's eyes darted between me and Daniel in shock. And Adam? Adam stayed silent. But Morgan wasn't one to back down easily. "Family?" She let out a disbelieving laugh. "You must be mistaken. Claire is my son's wife. She has no connections to this place." I leaned forward slightly, letting my voice carry just enough for nearby tables to hear. "Actually, Morgan, I do." She stiffened. I continued, my voice smooth. "Before I married Adam, I worked in fine dining. And Daniel?" I smiled. "He was my mentor." Morgan's smirk vanished. Daniel nodded. "Claire wasn't just an employee. She was one of the best students I ever trained." And just like that, the power shifted. The maitre d' immediately straightened, nodding. "Of course, Miss Claire. I'll have the staff prepare a table for you right away." Morgan's face turned an alarming shade of red. "This is ridiculous," she hissed. "She gets special treatment just because she used to work here?" Daniel chuckled. "No, Morgan. She gets special treatment because she earned it." As the waiters set a place for me, right next to Adam, I settled into my chair, smiling sweetly. "Oh, look. Turns out there was room for me after all," Morgan seethed, but there was nothing she could do. Dinner that night was exquisite, not because of the food, but because I had done something Morgan never expected. I had taken control. But this was only the beginning. Because while Morgan thought she had won by humiliating me, she had no idea what was coming next. The aftermath, a shift in power. That night, as I stepped outside into the cool night air, I pulled out my phone and typed a single message. "We're moving forward. Initiate the process first thing tomorrow." Seconds later, a reply came. "Understood. You'll have the first draft of the divorce settlement by noon." I exhaled slowly. Divorce. The word didn't scare me. What scared me was how long I had ignored the truth, that Adam had never been on my side. That for years I had been alone in my own marriage, but not anymore. By the time I arrived home, Adam still hadn't returned, that I walked into his home office and opened the safe. The passcode? The same one he had used for years. Inside, I found everything: investment documents, bank statements, business agreements. But what I needed most was the contract that tied his most lucrative investment to my initial funding. I took a quick photo of it, then placed it back exactly as I found it. When Adam finally walked through the door, I was sitting on the couch, suitcase beside me. He stopped, staring at me in confusion. "Claire, what are you?" I stood up, smoothing my dress. "You made your choice tonight, Adam, when your mother humiliated me, and you just sat there, like you always do." His jaw tensed. "I was trying to keep the peace." I laughed. "Peace? Adam, your mother planned this entire dinner to embarrass me, and you let her." He ran a hand through his hair. "It's complicated, Claire. You know how she is?" "No, Adam. It's simple. You're weak." For the first time, he had nothing to say, and for the first time, I felt completely in control. Because this was just the beginning of their downfall. The dinner incident, power shift, Claire's unexpected connection. The tension in Le Mirage had grown so thick, it could have been sliced with one of the restaurant's premium steak knives. The hum of polite conversation from nearby tables had dwindled. All eyes were subtly turned in our direction, pretending not to listen, but undoubtedly absorbing every single second of the unfolding drama. Morgan's mocking laughter had just left her lips, lingering in the air like the last note of a sour symphony. She thought she had won. She thought she had finally pushed me out, humiliated me for good. She had no idea what was coming next. Then a voice cut through the tension like a blade, calm, commanding, and with an unmistakable air of authority. "Claire?" A ripple of silence fell across the restaurant. Morgan's smirk faltered. Her hand, elegantly resting on the stem of her wine glass, tightened slightly. The moment she heard his voice, something flickered in her eyes, something close to fear. Because stepping toward me, with the kind of presence that turned heads in any room he entered, was Daniel Leon. Daniel Leon, the owner of Le Mirage, a man whose name carried weight in the world of fine dining. Tall, silver at his temples, exuding confidence and control, he wasn't just another businessman. He was the businessman in this industry. Morgan froze. Charlotte and Emma, who had been snickering at my expense just moments ago, exchanged uneasy glances. Adam's grip on his fork tightened, his knuckles going white. "And me?" I smiled. "Daniel," I greeted, my voice smooth, effortless. "It's been a while." His sharp gaze swept over the table, landing briefly on Morgan before settling back on me. His lips curved into a smirk, one of genuine amusement. "It has," he agreed. "What brings you here tonight?" I let out a soft chuckle, my expression relaxed, completely unfazed by the spectacle Morgan had attempted to create. "Well," I gestured to the table where my in-laws sat, their discomfort palpable. "Apparently, I wasn't included in the reservation. A bit of an oversight, wouldn't you say?" Daniel's eyes darkened, his smile flattening into something calculating. "That won't do at all," he murmured. Morgan scoffed, regaining some of her bravado. "Oh, please," she snapped, crossing her arms. "You can't just find a table for her. This is a private dining establishment." Daniel's response was swift and merciless. "Claire is not a walk-in, Mrs. Sinclair." He turned to the maitre d', his voice as smooth as aged wine. "She is family." Silence. Stunned silence. Charlotte's glass nearly slipped from her fingers. Emma's face drained of color. And Adam, his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. But Morgan? She wasn't one to accept defeat easily. "Family?" she repeated, her voice laced with thinly veiled hostility. "You must be mistaken. Claire is my son's wife. She has no connections to this place." I tilted my head slightly, my smile never wavering. "Actually, Morgan, I do." She stiffened. I leaned forward slightly, ensuring my voice carried just enough for nearby tables to hear. "Before I married Adam, I worked in fine dining. And Daniel?" I let my smile grow. "He was my mentor." Morgan's smirk vanished. Daniel nodded, stepping beside me as if to solidify his position on my side. "Claire wasn't just an employee," he said, his voice firm, undeniable. "She was one of the best students I ever trained, sharp, talented, exceptional. I saw it then, the exact moment Morgan realized she had made a mistake. The carefully constructed illusion she had painted of me, that I was a nobody, a charity case, an outsider, was shattering before her eyes. Because suddenly, I wasn't the outsider, I was the one with power. The maitre d' immediately straightened, nodding. "Of course, Miss Claire. I'll have the staff prepare a table for you right away." Morgan's face flushed with fury. "This is ridiculous!" she hissed. "She gets special treatment just because she used to work here?" Daniel chuckled, a rich, knowing sound. "No, Morgan. She gets special treatment because she earned it." And just like that, the tables had turned. The perfect revenge. The waitstaff moved with impressive efficiency, setting a place for me, right next to Adam. I settled into my chair, calm and composed, while Morgan sat across from me, seething. "Oh, look," I mused, lifting my wine glass. Turns out there was room for me after all. Charlotte and Emma, who had spent years looking down on me, suddenly seemed unsure of themselves. They weren't laughing anymore. Adam, still silent, took a slow sip of his drink, probably hoping it would make him invisible. And Morgan? Morgan was fuming. But the best part? There was nothing she could do. Dinner that night was exquisite, not just because of the food, but because for the first time ever, Morgan Sinclair was powerless. She had played her little game, thinking she could humiliate me. Instead, she was the one left humiliated, and I wasn't done yet. As the night unfolded, I made a point to charm the waitstaff, exchange stories with Daniel, and enjoy every single bite of my meal, all while Morgan sat across from me, simmering with rage. By the time dessert arrived, the message was clear. Morgan Sinclair had lost. And this? This was only the beginning. The revenge plan. A calculated exit. The message that changed everything. That night, as I stepped out of Le Mirage, the cool night air wrapped around me like a whisper of change. The city lights flickered, casting their glow across the pavement, but my mind was laser-focused on one thing: revenge. Not the kind that's loud and messy. No, I wanted the kind of revenge that's cold, calculated, and irreversible. Morgan had spent years trying to break me down, trying to make me feel small. Adam had stood by, a willing accomplice in his mother's cruelty, too weak to stand up for me, too weak to be my partner. I was done. I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady, my decision unshakable. Me. We're moving forward. Initiate the process first thing tomorrow. The reply came within seconds. Attorney. Understood. You'll have the first draft of the divorce settlement by noon. I exhaled, a slow, deliberate breath, my grip on the phone tightening. This was it, the beginning of the end. The final pieces of the puzzle. By the time I arrived home, the house was silent. Adam hadn't returned yet. That gave me just enough time to do what needed to be done. I walked into his home office, the place he spent hours in, obsessing over his investments, his business deals, the empire he thought he built on his own. How ironic. He never even realized that without me, none of it would have existed. I strode to the mahogany desk at the center of the room, my heels clicking softly against the polished floor. My gaze landed on the safe built into the cabinet. Adam was predictable. I knelt down, my hands moving swiftly to the keypad. He had never changed the passcode. A mistake. Click. The safe unlocked with a quiet whir. And there it was. Everything I needed. Stacks of financial documents, bank statements, investment agreements. Contracts detailing the millions of dollars in funding that had fueled Adam's investments. My money, not his. He had always taken credit. Always acted like he was the self-made businessman. But the truth was sitting right here, in my hands. I pulled out my phone, snapping photo after photo, making sure every last detail was documented. By the time I closed the safe, I already had everything I needed to destroy him. The moment of truth. The front door creaked open just as I settled onto the couch, suitcase packed beside me. Adam stepped in, his expression blank at first, then shifting into confusion as he noticed the packed bag at my side. "Claire," he he murmured, his voice laced with hesitation, like he already knew what was coming. I tilted my head, studying him. He didn't look sorry. He didn't look like a man who had spent the night rethinking his choices. He looked like someone who thought he could fix this with a few empty words. I wasn't interested. "You made your choice tonight, Adam," I said, my voice steady, calm. "When your mother humiliated me and you just sat there, like you always do." His jaw tensed. "I was trying to keep the peace." I laughed. A cold, sharp sound. "Peace?" I repeated, standing up. "Adam, your mother planned that dinner to embarrass me, and you let her, just like you always do." He dragged a hand through his hair, exhaling. "It's complicated, Claire. You know how she is." "No, Adam." I shook my head. "It's simple. You're weak." His gaze snapped to mine, offended, but he didn't argue, because he knew it was true. "I think I'm done here," I murmured, reaching for my suitcase. Just as I took a step toward the door, his voice dropped. "I'll fight you on this." I stopped. Slowly, I turned to face him. "You won't get half of everything," he continued, his voice low, almost threatening. I stared at him for a moment before letting out a small, knowing smile. "Oh, Adam," I murmured. "You really should read your own contracts more carefully." His expression flickered. "What are you talking about?" I took my time, enjoying the moment. "You used my money to build your empire," I said simply. "And guess what?" I let the moment stretch. "I have all the paperwork to prove it." His face drained of color. I watched as the realization hit him, as his world started to collapse around him. Morgan had tried to break me. Adam had tried to silence me. But now, I was the one taking everything. The confrontation. Claire walks away with everything. The moment of reckoning. The front door swung open, and Adam stepped inside, oblivious to the storm waiting for him. I was sitting on the couch, suitcase neatly packed beside me, a glass of wine in hand. The calm before the storm. His eyes flickered from the suitcase to my face, confusion settling in. "Claire." His voice trailed off, uncertain, hesitant. I took a slow sip of my wine before setting the glass down. Then I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "You're late," I said coolly. He frowned, shutting the door behind him. "What's going on?" I exhaled, standing up. "What's going on, Adam, is that I'm done." His brows knitted together, his body stiffening. "Claire, don't be dramatic." "Dramatic?" I let out a sharp laugh. "You sat there tonight while your mother humiliated me in front of an entire restaurant. You watched. You did nothing." He rubbed a hand over his face, exasperated. "I was trying to keep the peace." "There is no peace, Adam." My voice cut through the room, sharper than I intended. "You don't keep the peace. You surrender to your mother every time, and I'm done waiting for you to grow a spine." He sucked in a breath, his hands tightening into fists. "Claire, let's talk about this." I tilted my head. "Talk? Now you want to talk? Where was this conversation when your mother looked me in the eye and told me I didn't belong? When she left me standing outside, excluded, like some kind of outsider?" His jaw clenched, but he remained silent. "Exactly," I whispered. "You don't talk, Adam. You don't defend me. You just sit there." His gaze darted to the suitcase again, realization creeping in. "Where are you going?" I picked up my bag, slinging it over my shoulder. "Anywhere but here." He stepped forward, blocking my path. "You can't just walk out." I arched a brow. "Watch me." His breathing turned shallow, panic flashing in his eyes. "You're making a mistake." I exhaled, shaking my head. "No, Adam. The mistake was staying this long." The final blow. Then, his face twisted, something dark surfacing beneath the desperation. "You think you can just leave and take half of everything?" His voice was low, menacing. "I'll fight you on this, Claire. You won't get a dime." I let out a small, amused laugh, shaking my head. "Oh, Adam." I took a step closer, dropping my voice to a whisper. "You really should read your own contracts more carefully." His smirk faltered. What the hell does that mean? I reached into my bag, pulling out an envelope. Slowly, deliberately, I tossed it onto the table. His hands trembled as he picked it up, flipping through the papers inside. His eyes skimmed over the legal jargon, and then his entire body stiffened. I watched as the color drained from his face. He swallowed hard. What is this? I smiled, savoring the moment. That, Adam, is proof that every major investment you made in the past 5 years was funded by me. His throat bobbed. That's not possible. I leaned against the table, crossing my arms. Oh, but it is. He flipped another page, his breathing turning shallow as the weight of the truth crashed down on him. I continued, my voice dripping with satisfaction. You didn't have the capital to start your little empire, Adam. You needed money, my money. And because you never bothered to read the fine print, you signed away any real claim to it. His hand shook as he set the papers down. You tricked me. I arched a brow. Tricked you? Oh no, Adam, you were just too arrogant to check who actually owned what. His jaw clenched. Claire, we can work something out? I scoffed. No, we can't. His eyes burned with desperation, but I had already won. The last goodbye. I picked up my wine glass, downing the last sip before setting it aside. Then I turned toward the door, reaching for the handle. Claire, wait. His voice cracked. I paused, just for a second. Then I turned slightly, glancing at him over my shoulder. You should call your mother, I murmured. Tell her you lost everything. And with that, I walked out. Not just out of the house, not just out of the marriage, but out of his entire life. And he knew it. Because for the first time ever, Adam Sinclair had finally lost. Final victory. Cutting ties and moving on the day had finally arrived. Claire sat at the head of a sleek, polished conference table, a glass of champagne in one hand and a stack of finalized legal documents in the other. Across from her, her attorney smiled, sliding the final set of papers toward her. It's done, the attorney said, her voice calm, professional. The divorce is finalized. You are officially free. Claire exhaled slowly, running her fingers over the thick paper. Free. The word tasted better than the champagne. A month ago, she had walked out of Adam's house, knowing she would never return. But the real victory wasn't just leaving, it was making sure she never looked back. And now she was here, on the other side, with everything she deserved. Morgan's last, desperate attack. As expected, Morgan Sinclair did not go down without a fight. 2 days after the divorce was finalized, Claire's phone buzzed. Morgan Sinclair, you manipulative, gold-digging little. Claire rolled her eyes and blocked the number before even reading the rest. Morgan had called her furious, screaming about how Claire had stolen from her son, how she had tricked Adam, how she was nothing without him. It was laughable. She knew Morgan was fuming, not just because Claire had left, but because she had done so on her own terms. Claire had walked away with half of Adam's empire, not because she took something that wasn't hers, but because it had always been hers to begin with. She had simply claimed what she had built. Morgan wasn't angry because Claire had won. She was angry because, for the first time in her life, she was powerless. And Claire? She had never felt stronger. Adam's pathetic attempt at redemption days later, another message came through, this time from Adam. Adam. Claire. Can we talk? Claire scoffed, setting down her coffee. Talk? Now he wanted to talk? She ignored the message. Minutes later, another one. Adam. I don't know what to do without you. Claire smirked, shaking her head. Ah, there it was. Adam had never been good at handling real consequences. He had spent his life cushioned by his mother's power, by his wealth, by the illusion that he was in control. And now that illusion had shattered. Because he had never been in control. Not of Claire. Not of his own success. And certainly not of his future. She typed back a single response. That's not my problem anymore. Then, with one final tap, she blocked his number too. A new beginning. For the first time in years, Claire felt light. No more walking on eggshells. No more trying to fit into a world that had never wanted her. She had fought her way through the storm, through the betrayal, through every single humiliation Morgan and Adam had thrown at her. And she had won. Her bank accounts were secure. Her investments were thriving. And most importantly, she was free. Claire raised her champagne glass, gazing out over the city skyline. A new chapter had begun, and this time, she was writing it for herself, and just like that, the game was over. Morgan thought she had control. Adam thought he could manipulate his way out. But in the end, Claire was the one who walked away, free, powerful, and in control. Let this be a reminder. Never underestimate the one you try to break. Because sometimes the quietest storms hit the hardest. What do you think? Did Claire handle this the right way? Should she have done more? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. If you love seeing karma served cold, make sure to subscribe to Destiny Rewritten. There are more stories coming that will leave you speechless. Because in this world, fate isn't set in stone. It's written by those bold enough to change it. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay strong, stay sharp, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply winning.